Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987 in South Africa. When she was just 10 years old, her father passed away. This tragic loss had a profound impact on her family, and they decided to Whitby, United Kingdom, to live with relatives. However, they did not find the peace they were seeking, and after some time, they returned to South Africa. Despite the challenges she faced, Carmen decided to stay with her relatives when she turned 18. She later moved to London, where she completed her studies and earned a master's degree in marketing. Carmen had a strong and charismatic personality that drew people to her. She was a loyal friend and companion to many, but living in a big city like London came with a high price tag. To maintain a decent standard of living, Carmen had to work hard. During the day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and in her free time, she worked part-time in a gentleman's club. Although her choice of part-time job may seem unusual, Carmen was a girl with strong values and never engaged in unnecessary or undignified behavior, which earned her the respect of her clients. In this place, she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Born in New Zealand in April 1978, Brad's parents separated when he was 9 years old, and he stayed with his mother. They later moved to Australia in 2001. After graduating from university with an engineering degree in the construction industry, Brad was offered a job as chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK. To boost his professional image, Brad hired a gentleman's agency and met Carmen, a beautiful, intelligent, and tall woman with dark hair and bright eyes. Although they started with a casual arrangement, Brad and Carmen continued to communicate informally, which eventually turned into a strong friendship, and later, love. Their romantic relationship blossomed quickly, and they soon moved in together. Their life was built on trust, care, and mutual support, making them look absolutely happy. Carmen became pregnant, and Brad thought it would be best for them to move back to New Zealand, where the air is clean and the pace of life is more relaxed. They returned to Auckland in March 2005. After their son Jack was born, he brought immense joy and happiness into their lives from day one. Carmen and Brad prioritized his safety and well-being, providing everything he needed for a happy childhood. To them, Jack was the center of their universe. However, with Jack's arrival, serious disagreements began to surface in their relationship. The first disagreements arose over how to raise their child. As a result, their relationship became rocky and unstable, ultimately leading to their breakup 3 years later. Despite the challenges, they shared joint custody of Jack and made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for his sake. The breakup was difficult for both Carmen and Brad, but they put their differences aside to ensure little Jack's well-being. Carmen and Jack moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, in Oakland, seeking emotional support and a sense of family. As time passed, Carmen regained her emotional balance and started rebuilding her life without Brad. In 2008, she decided to move to a house on a nearby street to Brad's so her young son could be closer to his father. Carmen, who had lost her own father at a young age, wanted to ensure her child would have a father figure in his life as much as possible. Carmen and Brad maintained a relationship for the sake of their son, but many people mistakenly thought they remained couple. In truth, they only communicated when necessary to support their child. As they went their separate ways, both Carmen and Brad concentrated on finding personal happiness. Brad continued his career as a construction engineer and eventually started a new relationship in May 2009, which led to an engagement. Carmen focused on raising their son while working at the gentleman's club, which upset Brad. He thought the mother of his child should not be involved in questionable activities. This disagreement created tension in their relationship, which worsened over time. Carmen issued ultimatums, but Brad ignored them. Despite this, Brad got married again and was expecting another child. His new financial responsibilities affected the alimony he paid Carmen for Jack's care. The money issue triggered a series of scandals. On March 19, 2010, neighbors called the police due to a domestic violence incident. Carmen was involved in a physical altercation with Brad during an argument and received a warning. Their relationship finally broke down. Even after separation, arguments continued. Each new question about Jack's care sparked aggression and conflict between the two former lovers. They couldn't agree on something as simple as which school Jack should attend, leading to more disputes. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to finalize a written agreement for child support and discuss a new school for Jack. However, Carmen was unhappy with the document and refused to sign it. In a heated argument, she shouted that Jack was not Brad's son and told him to leave. Brad departed. 2 weeks passed without Brad contacting Carmen. Concerned for her safety, Brad reported Carmen Thomas missing to the police on July 13, 2010. The authorities took his report and launched an investigation. By analyzing video footage and interviewing neighbors, investigators were able to piece together a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance, uncovering crucial details that would aid in the search for her. On June 29th, a surveillance camera caught Carmen on tape at a nearby supermarket, not far from the house she shared with Jack. The police were alerted to the house when they noticed that there was no garbage can outside, which seemed unusual. Upon inspecting the house, they found traces of blood on the front door, washing machine, and shower. Forensic experts used luminol to detect blood evidence, which reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of bloodstains on the bathroom door and floor, confirming their suspicions. The landlady reported that on June 29th she heard loud screams, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. She went to Carmen's door, but no one answered. When she looked out the window, she saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack on the ground. Alarmed, she called her husband. Before he arrived, Brad emerged from the house, holding dirty clothes. When he saw the landlady, he hastily explained that Carmen had undergone a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlady was suspicious, noting that Brad looked like he had just showered. Despite her doubts, she didn't call the police, as she had no reason to disbelieve Brad's story. The police investigation focused on Carmen's cell phone, which showed a steady stream of messages and calls. However, the tone and style of these communications didn't match Carmen's usual way of communicating. This sparked even more questions. Where did Carmen go for medical help, and why? Fortunately, the answers weren't far off. As the investigation continued, Carmen's car was discovered. In the back seat, her personal belongings, including luggage and clothes, were found. A closer look at the seized suitcase revealed bloodstains on some items. A note in the car revealed that Carmen owed money to her employer. A surprising discovery was made in the glove compartment, an envelope with Misty's name on it, containing $270. Police Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after discovering bloodstains in Carmen's car. A search of the countryside southeast of Auckland was conducted, but Carmen's body was not found. The investigation continued, with detectives analyzing Carmen's and Brad's phone records. They made a surprising discovery. Both phones were in the same location throughout the search period, and Carmen's phone hadn't connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had vanished from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen disappeared. A neighbor had seen it through her window. But why was it necessary for the trash can to be inside the house in the first place? The police investigated Brad's phone and financial records, which revealed some suspicious purchases on June 30th, including a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and garbage bags. By examining Brad's daily routine, they found some unusual events that didn't fit his normal pattern. One day, he arrived at the construction site very early and spent a long time walking alone around the property. While this was unusual, it wasn't enough to raise concern among the workers who saw him. As the evidence mounted, including Carmen's phone and Brad's questionable purchases, he went from being a victim to a suspect. The police believed that Brad had killed Carmen by hitting her on the head multiple times and then hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to modify the course of justice. He pleaded not guilty and was scheduled for trial. In a surprising coincidence, Brad's second son was born to his new partner while he was in custody, causing a wave of emotion and resentment in the young father. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators where he had buried Carmen's body. Brad concocted a plan to make it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never came back. Confident in his scheme, he was convinced he'd pulled it off. However, life had other plans. Under interrogation, Brad recounted the events of that fateful day. It began with a heated argument, which ended with Carmen kicking Brad out of the house and claiming Jack wasn't his son. Brad left, but 5 minutes later, he returned and struck Carmen on the head with a baseball bat, rendering her unconscious. The impact was severe, causing blood to gush from the wound and stain the floor bright red, accompanied by labored breathing. Standing over Carmen's lifeless body, Brad's eyes blazed with a wild, unhinged expression. He realized the gravity of his actions, but his anger and resentment towards Carmen's words clouded his judgment. In a fit of rage, he unleashed several more punches. Although aware of the irreparable consequences, his obsessive fury consumed him. Fleeting memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but they were now forever lost. Brad knew his life would never be the same after that devastating moment, but he felt no remorse as he had eliminated his primary problem, and Jack was now exclusively his. After regaining consciousness, Brad took a shower and discreetly left Carmen's house. In the subsequent days, he took swift action to dispose of Carmen's body and conceal the evidence of the crime. He contacted his friend and arranged to meet him outside a supermarket, asking him to purchase 3 black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning supplies. Brad waited outside the store, trying to avoid raising suspicions. Once his friend had made the purchase, Brad returned to the apartment and began the cleanup process. He meticulously wiped away the blood spatter and then placed the body in a garbage bag, which he later discarded in a trash can. After Carmen's murdered, the defendant cut her body into 8 pieces to dispose of it. He severed her legs at the hip joints, then cut each leg into 2 pieces at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. On July 3rd, he confided in a friend at a boat ramp in Oahu Bay, Oakland, telling him that he had killed Carmen during an argument and needed help to get rid of the body. However, the friend refused to lend him a boat, and the attempt to dump the remains at sea failed. Over the next few days, the defendant drove to Wyrie Ridge in West Auckland and buried the body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot, leaving behind a suitcase of clothes and other personal belongings to make it seem like she had intentionally left. However, in his hurry, he failed to notice that the suitcase also contained bloody clothes. After disposing of the car, Brad attempted to create the illusion that Carmen was still alive by sending text messages from her cell phone to her friends. He pretended to be Carmen, claiming she was unwell and had been in poor health for days. However, Brad's plan ultimately failed. On October 1st, the police searched the burial site indicated by Brad and discovered Carmen's body. Her remains were found in plastic containers in a makeshift grave on Wyrie Ridge, and an autopsy revealed that she had died from multiple head injuries, including a fatal blow that caused a compressed skull fracture. After forensic examinations, Carmen's body was returned to her family for burial. A private funeral was held at Green Lane Christian Center on October 13th to honor Carmen, a young mother known for her cheerful, kind, and successful nature. Her son, little Jack, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket, having waited and hoped to see and hug his mother. The first court hearing for Carmen's case took place on February 8, 2011. Judge Venning found the crime to be unintentional, taking into account Brad's claim that he acted in a fit of rage. While Judge Venning acknowledged this, he was less lenient when it came to Brad's attempted cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to obstruct justice. According to the police investigation, on July 29, 2010, Callahan fatally struck Carmen Thomas multiple times in the head. He then sent a text message to a friend asking for 3 garbage bags and a bottle of kerosene. Subsequently, Callahan dismembered Carmen's body into 8 pieces to dispose of it. On November 25, 2011, a retrial was held, and police officers involved in the case filled the Auckland High Court. Unexpectedly, Brad Callahan pleaded guilty to 2 charges: murder and attempting to obstruct justice following Carmen's death. This was a reversal of his previous denial of guilt. The judge described Callahan's actions as one of the most serious cases of attempting to pervert the course of justice, stating it was as serious as it gets. The judge also characterized the murder of Carmen Thomas as brutal, but not severe enough to warrant the harshest sentencing laws. A 33-year-old man, Brad Callahan, was sentenced to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas in Auckland High Court. The court was packed with Carmen's friends and family, including her parents, who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venning condemned Callahan's attempts to cover his tracks, describing them as insufficient to bring him to justice. Callahan will serve his life sentence and 6 years for attempting to pervert the course of justice concurrently. Detective Inspector Mark Benefield stated that Callahan's actions had a devastating impact on 2 families and that he had effectively passed judgment on himself. Callahan's supporters left the court without commenting. Carmen's family expressed their grief and anger over her tragic loss, grateful that Callahan will be imprisoned for a long time to reflect on the harm he caused. Her mother, Teresa Scott, was left completely devastated by the incident. Detective Mark Benefield explained that the 10-week investigation into Carmen's disappearance involved hundreds of hours of police work. Early on, they suspected she was murdered and carefully gathered evidence, following proper legal procedures. Benefield praised the cooperation with the defendant's employer and ongoing efforts to search the construction site for more evidence. He didn't rule out further arrests or charges related to Carmen's death. The Thomas family is devastated, saying they'll never forgive Brad for his actions. However, Carmen's stepfather, Wayne Callahan, and his attorney, Stuart Grieve, acknowledged Brad's acceptance of responsibility and won't challenge the sentence. The case raises concerns about potential biases against Carmen due to her profession, but emphasizes that the victim is not to blame and Brad's actions were inexcusable. The case has garnered significant media attention due to its rarity in New Zealand. The impact on Carmen's young son, Jack, who now lives under an assumed name, is also discussed, with the need to protect him from learning the truth about his mother's fate. The case of Nancy Paola Reyes. Nancy Paola Reyes Gorsi was born on April 13, 1991, in Granados, Guatemala, to Jorge and Pren Gorsi, a poor family of 7. Despite their financial struggles, her parents were determined to provide their 5 children with a good education, hoping they would have better lives. Nancy excelled in school, which enabled her to enroll in the University of Villanua, where she earned a degree in business administration and document management with honors. However, her academic achievements did not immediately translate to career success. She worked part-time as a cashier and later became an administrator at a supermarket, but her professional growth stagnated. During her university years, Nancy was in an unregistered marriage with a man whose identity remains private, and they had 2 daughters together. Unfortunately, the relationship ended and the couple separated. The father of the children lost interest in their well-being and failed to provide financial support. Nancy lived with her parents and daughters, working at a supermarket with no clear future prospects. The family struggled financially, barely covering essential expenses. However, Nancy's older sister's decision to immigrate to the U.S. in 2013 changed everything. Her sister found a good job, got married, and settled down, inspiring Nancy to make a similar change. Instead of the US, Nancy chose to relocate to sunny Spain. The problem was that Nancy didn't have enough money to buy a one-way plane ticket, let alone cover initial expenses. So she worked hard for several years, saving diligently until she finally had enough money to make her dream a reality. In July 2018, Nancy bought a ticket to Madrid, promising her parents she would stay in touch to alleviate their worries. Her plan was to find a place to live and a job upon arrival, with a few €1,000 to cover rent, food, and essentials until she could secure a steady income. When Nancy left, she was 27 years old, and her daughters, who stayed with their grandparents in Guatemala, were 7 and 5 years old. After a brief stay in Madrid, Nancy moved to Barcelona and later settled in Cádiz, the capital of the province of Cádiz, Spain. She kept in close touch with her family, calling home almost every day to check in on them and regularly sending money to support them. Over time, her remittances enabled her parents not only to support themselves and her daughters, but also to renovate their old house. Although Nancy didn't have a steady job, she made a living by doing odd jobs like cleaning houses for wealthy families and caring for the elderly and sick. Despite the challenges, Nancy never complained and was optimistic about her decision to move to Europe, where she believed she had more opportunities. She was convinced that she could never have earned as much back in Guatemala, even if she worked non-stop without days off. Nancy was pleased with her new life and even planned to bring her daughters to Spain once she had saved enough to rent a comfortable and spacious home for the whole family. Nancy initially kept her personal life private, citing her busy work schedule as the reason. However, in the spring of 2020, she confided in her parents about meeting Carlos Andres Bustamante, with whom she had begun a romantic relationship. The two had met by chance while Nancy was searching for a new place to live, and as they spent more time together, their relationship blossomed. They eventually moved in together, with Carlos being a year older than Nancy. At the start of their relationship, Carlos didn't have a steady income, relying on small, odd jobs to get by. As a result, Nancy became the primary breadwinner, covering their housing and bills, and often providing financial support for Carlos's personal expenses. Despite this, Nancy never expressed any concerns to her family, leading them to believe that she had found a loving and supportive partner. Nancy's two younger brothers had also relocated to Spain, and she remained in close contact with them, especially Dennis, the youngest, who had met Carlos and found him likable. In June 2020, Nancy and Carlos decided to move to Santander, a resort city on the Atlantic coast. When Nancy spoke with her family, she mentioned that the climate was warmer and there were more job opportunities. However, this was when problems in her relationship with Carlos started to emerge, which she tried to keep hidden. Carlos turned out to be jealous, hot-tempered, and even cruel. He had no career ambitions and was content to be supported by Nancy. Moreover, he struggled with alcohol abuse and occasionally used prohibited substances, despite repeatedly promising to quit and find a stable job. When Nancy discovered she was pregnant, she was already questioning whether to continue her life with Carlos. Carlos was overjoyed by the news and promised that their life would improve, but in reality, things only worsened. He continued to drink and use drugs, taking money from Nancy or asking his mother for it. Worse still, he began physically abusing Nancy, which she tried to conceal from everyone. On the evening of August 12th, a disturbing scene unfolded while Nancy was video chatting with her parents. Her partner, Carlos, suddenly burst into a fit of rage, yelling at Nancy and demanding to know who she was talking to. Refusing to believe her when she told him it was her mother, he snatched the phone from her hands. After verifying the truth by glancing at the screen, he carelessly tossed the device onto a chair and walked away. The very next day, a similar incident occurred. Carlos again wrestled the phone from Nancy's hands while she was speaking with her parents and daughters. He insisted on knowing who she was talking to, hurled insults at her, and even made threats. A terrified Nancy later attempted to downplay the situation to her relatives, attributing Carlos's behavior to excessive jealousy and assuring them that everything was under control. However, her concerned parents urged her to report the incidents to the police, but Nancy insisted on handling the matter herself. On August 17th, Nancy had a concerning phone conversation with her sister. She stated that if anything happened to her, Carlos would be responsible. Although her words were ominous, she didn't explain further, only asking her sister to take care of her children if needed. This was the last time her sister heard from Nancy. Nancy vanished on August 20th around 2 p.m. She sent a text to her father, promising to call later that evening, but she never did. Her family tried contacting Carlos, but he didn't respond either. The situation was alarming because the couple had recently moved to Santander, had no friends there, and Nancy's brothers were on the other side of the country. A few days later, a suspicious message came from Carlos's phone, claiming that he and Nancy had argued and decided to separate. The message stated that Nancy had left to find a new apartment, ignoring his calls, and he had no idea where she was. Nancy's brothers suggested that Carlos come to Ciudad Real to file a missing person report with them. Carlos agreed, but he never showed up, didn't file the report, and ceased communicating with the family. Nancy's relatives reached out to the police to file a report about her disappearance. In the meantime, Nancy's friends provided her brothers with the address of Sandra Bustamante, Carlos's mother. When they visited her, she became emotional and confessed that she had suspected her son might do something harmful to his partner, but she didn't provide any specific details. Sandra also claimed to have no knowledge about the whereabouts of her son and his fiancée. Although Carlos wasn't answering her calls, he sent her brief messages asking her to stop inquiring and to give him some time. Despite liking Nancy, Sandra was aware of her son's capabilities and understood his true nature. Sandra went to the police station the next day for questioning about Nancy's disappearance. She told the officers what she had already shared with Nancy's brothers: Carlos's troubling behavior and a lengthy text message from Nancy. In the message, Nancy warned Sandra not to give Carlos any money because he would waste it on alcohol and drugs, which made him aggressive and cruel. Nancy said Carlos had no intention of finding a job or overcoming his addictions, and his behavior had become increasingly threatening, making her consider leaving him. She believed it was better to end their relationship before someone got hurt. The investigation also uncovered some disturbing information about Carlos. He had been convicted of bodily harm multiple times, including brutally beating his own mother when he was 17. Although he only received probation at the time, he later served short sentences for assaulting women he lived with and had relationships with. The investigation into Carlos and Nancy's relationship revealed many red flags from the start. Carlos had a history of aggression, drug addiction, and a criminal record, which was compounded by his uncontrollable rage. Meanwhile, Nancy's friends disclosed that she was not just a housekeeper or caregiver, as she had claimed. Instead, she was providing escort services to wealthy clients in Santander, earning a substantial income. Carlos was aware of her occupation and initially accepted it, as it allowed him to avoid finding work himself. However, when Nancy became pregnant, Carlos's behavior became increasingly erratic. He grew suspicious about the child's paternity, wondering if it belonged to one of her clients. Additionally, he was consumed by jealousy, vacillating between preventing her from interacting with other men and forcing her to continue working to support them financially. Meanwhile, Carlos squandered the money he took from his mother on his own vices, leaving them struggling to make ends meet. After nearly a week of unexplained absence, Nancy and Carlos's whereabouts were unknown. Although Carlos had been in touch through messages, he never revealed his location. It wasn't until August 26th that police finally obtained a search warrant for the couple's vacant rental apartment in Santander. The discovery they made was gruesome and left no doubt that Nancy had met a tragic end. Bloodstains were found throughout the apartment, with some attempts made to clean them up, but most were still visible to the naked eye, including in the clogged bathroom and toilet drains. The police also found fragments of bones, hair, skin, and internal organs. Forensic analysis confirmed that these belonged to Nancy, even though her body was not found in the apartment. The crime scene suggested that Nancy had been brutally killed, dismembered in the bathroom, and her remains disposed of elsewhere. Carlos was quickly identified as the main suspect in the case due to evidence found in the apartment, including a package from a local hardware store with his fingerprints on it. The package was for a small hatchet, but the tool itself was not discovered. Further investigation revealed that Carlos had bought the hatchet, along with rubber gloves and large trash bags, at a nearby market on August 20th. This was confirmed by security footage from the store. An elderly vendor who sold Carlos a small cart also positively identified him from a photo. The day after the gruesome discovery in the apartment, Carlos surprisingly surrendered to a Madrid police station, attempting to shift suspicion away from himself. He claimed to be reporting Nancy missing, but was promptly arrested as the prime suspect in the heinous crime. Carlos professed his innocence, stating that he and Nancy had argued and parted ways on August 20th, after which he left town in an emotional state, unaware of any subsequent events involving Nancy. He suggested that someone might have attacked her when she returned to gather her belongings. However, Carlos's alibi seemed dubious, especially considering the police found his fingerprints on the hatchet's packaging. Despite conducting an extensive search of nearby wastelands, sewer systems, and the coastline with the help of divers, no trace of Nancy was found. To further investigate, the police tracked Carlos's movements from August 20th to 26th, using his mobile phone signals, revealing that he had spent 3 days traveling along the coast and visiting Bilbao and Burgos before heading to Madrid. It was clear that Carlos was trying to conceal his activities, but it seemed unlikely that he would travel across the country with a dismembered body, leading authorities to continue their search in Santander. Street surveillance footage captured Carlos's movements on the evening of August 20th. He was seen walking towards a large forest park, but returned to his apartment late at night. He then left again, this time pushing a cart filled with unusual, oddly shaped bags. Since there were few cameras within the park, Carlos vanished from view once he entered the wooded area. Later, he re-emerged with the same cart, but it was now significantly lighter. He then proceeded towards the railway tracks, which were located near a steep cliff overgrown with bushes. After visiting this area, Carlos returned once more, but this time without the extra weight, providing law enforcement with a clear lead on where to search for the body. On September 16th, police discovered bags containing badly decomposed human remains in a heavily overgrown area on a hillside. The remains were identified as those of Nancy Gorcey, who had been dismembered into 20 parts using a hatchet. Although security camera footage showed everything Carlos had transported in a cart was recovered, one crucial item was still missing: the fetus of the 4-month pregnant Nancy. The state of the victim's genitals and lower abdomen revealed a brutal mutilation with a knife and hatchet, suggesting that the killer had removed the fetus and disposed of it separately from the mother's body. Despite mounting evidence, Carlos refused to admit his involvement, providing contradictory statements and trying to shift the blame onto an unknown attacker. However, traces of Nancy's blood were found on his clothes and shoes, which he had attempted to wash off but failed to completely remove. Through diligent investigation, authorities were able to reconstruct the sequence of tragic events and the entire scenario of the crime, ultimately incriminating Carlos. Forensic experts have reconstructed the events of August 20th. After an argument, the man brutally beat and strangled his pregnant partner, Nancy, in the kitchen, where bloodstains were later found on the floor and walls. Next, he moved Nancy's body to the bathroom, went shopping at a hardware store in the market, and then used a hatchet and large kitchen knife to dismember her body into 20 pieces. He placed the pieces in bags and loaded them into a cart. That night, he took the cart to a park, searching for secluded areas to dispose of the body parts. He followed a pre-planned route, scattering the bags in various locations, hoping they would never be found. The fate of the fetus removed from Nancy's body remains unknown. Carlos denied his guilt, claiming to have loved Nancy from the time of the murder until his arrest in Madrid. He used the money he stole from Nancy to fund his daily bar hopping across various cities. The investigation and search for evidence and witnesses took nearly 2 years, and the trial did not begin until July 2022. In November 2022, Carlos was found guilty of the premeditated, brutal murder of Nancy and her unborn child, as well as the dismemberment and desecration of her body. However, many considered the sentence too lenient. Carlos was sentenced to 25.5 years in prison and ordered to pay €150,000 in compensation to Nancy's parents and daughters. The case of Kelsey Turner. Kelsey Turner was born on March 5, 1993, in Norfolk, Virginia, to Samantha Ingram, a would-be model and dancer, and Christopher Ingram, a laborer. As the second child, she grew up with her older brother Colin. Shortly after her birth, the family moved to Jonesboro, Arkansas, where Kelsey spent most of her childhood. After her parents divorced a few years later, her father returned to Virginia and lost contact with his former wife and children. Kelsey developed into a stunning beauty with a perfect figure, ideal for modeling. She wasn't interested in school, preferring to attend parties, go on dates, and participate in events. Her dream was to become famous, feature on magazine covers, give interviews, and walk the red carpet. Although she lacked talent, her youth and good looks were her biggest assets. In high school, Kelsey began attending modeling castings with her mother Samantha's strong support. Samantha had once aspired to be a model herself and was enthusiastic about her daughter's endeavors. However, Kelsey only managed to secure a couple of shoots for clothing catalogs. At 18, Kelsey married Judy Turner when she was already pregnant. Shortly after, she gave birth to a daughter named Beverly. However, their marriage was brief and ended in divorce by the time she was 20. After abandoning her runway modeling career, Kelsey decided to pursue a career as a men's magazine model. She created a portfolio featuring provocative photos and submitted them to various publications, which quickly caught the attention of several men's magazines. Kelsey viewed this as the start of a promising career and her path to a glamorous, carefree lifestyle, which she had always aspired to. Over the next few years, she regularly received offers for photo shoots. She enthusiastically gave interviews, attended events, and attempted to establish valuable connections. Notable highlights of her career included one-off shoots for Playboy and Maxim, as well as a photo session and interview with 110 magazine. For these opportunities, she traveled to Los Angeles and Las Vegas. In an interview, Kelsey candidly described herself, stating that she was a blonde with a curvy figure and a slim waist, and asked what more one would need for happiness. She also shared that she enjoyed partying, spending time with friends, and living life to the fullest, believing that life is short and should be lived beautifully and joyfully. Kelsey was not overly concerned about her future, frequently changed partners, and quickly spent the money she earned or received from admirers. At 23, Kelsey had another child, a son named Josh, but the father refused to acknowledge him or marry her. As her modeling career declined, Kelsey turned to social media to build a following. She regularly posted provocative photos of herself in swimsuits, lingerie, and revealing outfits, which were heavily edited to make her look like a Barbie doll. She also shared pictures of herself at trendy boutiques, nightclubs, and popular entertainment venues, creating an illusion of a luxurious and carefree life. However, behind this facade, Kelsey, a single mother of 2 young children, was struggling to make ends meet. She didn't know how to manage her finances wisely and spent all her money as soon as she got it. In 2016, Kelsey faced a serious crisis after an incident involving her daughter, who was left traumatized and became withdrawn and mute, despite being physically unharmed. The incident led to therapy sessions with Dr. Thomas Burchard, a renowned child psychiatrist in Monterey, California, which ultimately contributed to a tragic event years later. Dr. Thomas Kirk Burchard was born in Boston, Massachusetts, on February 16, 1948, to a family of a prominent architect and engineer. His family later moved to Virginia, where his father taught at Harvard and the Architectural College at the Technological Institute. Thomas spent his childhood and youth in Virginia. Unlike his father, Thomas chose a career in medicine, specifically child psychology. After graduating from medical school and completing his thesis, Thomas worked as a pediatric psychiatry resident in several prestigious hospitals and lectured at colleges nationwide. Eventually, Dr. Burchard was employed at a public clinical hospital on the Monterey Peninsula in California, where he worked for over 40 years as a highly sought-after pediatric psychiatrist. Dr. Burchard was a highly respected doctor with a reputation for connecting with his young patients and taking on the toughest cases. He had a doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley, and an impressive academic record with over 300 scientific publications, cited nearly 40,000 times, giving him an H-index of 81. He was also known for his kindness, responsiveness, and generosity, particularly towards his young patients from low-income families. He even paid for hospital treatments for sick children and assisted single mothers. Dr. Burchard lived with a woman named D.Y., who was described as his assistant, housekeeper, lover, or fiancée. She was close to him and the first to notice changes in his behavior, which suggested early signs of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. As he approached his 70th birthday, Dr. Burchard became increasingly forgetful, absent-minded, and inattentive. To cope, he kept detailed diaries and notebooks to record everything, including names, dates, and events, to avoid confusion. He always carried a notebook with him containing sensitive information like banking details, account numbers, passwords, and card pins. Dr. Thomas Burchard's trusting nature led him to increase his financial support to those in need from hundreds to thousands of dollars. Kelsey Turner took advantage of Dr. Burchard's generosity. During her first visit with her daughter, she tearfully told the doctor that as a single mother of two, she couldn't afford his expensive services. Feeling empathetic, Dr. Burchard offered to treat her child for free and even gave her $300 to help with her children's needs. Kelsey was surprised, but soon realized that by sharing fabricated, tearful stories about her struggles, she could extract more money from the elderly doctor. At their next session, she concocted a performance, tearfully describing her younger son's illness and claiming she couldn't afford his expensive medication. This time, she specified a fake amount, and Dr. Burchard gave it to her in full. Kelsey's luck had changed, and from that point on, she frequently fabricated emotional stories to extract large sums of money from the trusting older man. Instead of using the money to support her children, she spent it on her own leisure activities, luxury clothing, and beauty treatments. Unwilling to return to her hometown in Virginia, Kelsey convinced Thomas to pay for her rental housing in California, claiming it would be easier to find a job and the climate was better for her children. It didn't take much persuasion for the doctor to agree, and he paid for the apartment. There were whispers that Kelsey and Thomas were romantically involved, and that this was the reason the respected doctor accommodated her every request. While these whispers may have held some truth, Kelsey maintained that Thomas had a paternal affection for her and her children, and was helping them selflessly. This was supported in court by Judy, although she added that Kelsey shamelessly took advantage of the doctor's kindness and his declining mental state due to dementia. Thomas paid for Kelsey's rental housing, bills, and gave her large sums of cash for necessities. He also rented a luxurious Mercedes-Benz convertible for her, rather than a practical family vehicle suitable for transporting children safely. As Kelsey's modeling career came to an end, her youth faded, and she stopped receiving offers for photo shoots. But instead of getting a job, she relied on her wealthy benefactor, Thomas, for financial support. Over nearly 3 years, Kelsey tried to break free from Thomas, blackmailing and threatening him. Despite this, he spent around $500,000 on her and her children. However, Kelsey wasted all the money on luxuries, including breast augmentation and liposuction, hoping to revive her modeling career. She prioritized partying over her children, neglecting them in the process. As a result, her ex-husband gained sole custody of their daughter through the court, stripping Kelsey of her parental rights. She was left with only her younger son, whose father had never shown interest in his child. Thomas was furious when he discovered what was happening, not because of the girl's ex-husband, but because of Kelsey's behavior. He realized she was a neglectful mother who didn't care for her children and spent all the money meant for them on her own desires, entertainment, and clothes. Dr. Burchard decided to have a serious talk with Kelsey, telling her he would no longer fund her extravagant and idle lifestyle. In response, Kelsey threatened to spread false rumors that the respected child psychiatrist had inappropriate, intimate interests in his young patients. Although this was a lie, any gossip on the matter could severely damage the doctor's reputation. Reluctantly, Burchard agreed to Kelsey's terms and continued to transfer money and pay her bills. In early 2019, Kelsey decided to move to Las Vegas with her son, intending to revive her modeling career. As usual, she expected Thomas, whom she continued to blackmail, to finance this venture. The doctor rented a house that Kelsey had chosen and transferred the amount of money she requested. After this, Kelsey disappeared for 2 months without giving any sign of her whereabouts. In late February 2019, Kelsey resurfaced because she was running out of money. She called Thomas, crying, and told him about her severe illness, inability to work, and struggle to provide for her son. However, when the doctor refused to help, Kelsey's tone changed abruptly, and she began threatening and blackmailing him again. It's crucial to highlight that Judy had been pushing Dr. Burchard for a while to report Kelsey to the authorities, exposing her blackmail and extortion attempts. Judy also recommended getting Child Protective Services involved, considering Kelsey's past, having already lost parental rights to her older daughter, and her inability to properly care for her young son. Anticipating a potential court case, Dr. Burchard took steps to ensure he had the backing of his colleagues, keeping them informed about the situation and securing their promises of support. To persuade Kelsey to leave Thomas alone, Judy previously tried talking to her directly, but Kelsey responded with threats of retaliation. This time, Dr. Burchard decided to travel to Las Vegas to verify Kelsey's claims, knowing what he would likely find. Judy attempted to discourage him from going, but the elderly man was resolute. She then advised him to bring her or one of his friends along, but Thomas insisted that this was a personal matter that he needed to resolve on his own. Dr. Burchard set out on his journey on March 1st, 2019. On the morning of March 7th, a group of tourists driving through Nevada took a detour from the main highway onto a dirt road leading to Lake Mead. They stumbled upon a solitary Mercedes-Benz convertible parked in the middle of the desert with its windows up and roof closed, but no one in sight. The tourists found this suspicious and decided to investigate. As they approached the vehicle, they noticed one of the windows was shattered. Upon peering inside, they discovered signs of a violent struggle with bloodstains throughout the interior. The tourists promptly reported their disturbing discovery to the police. Law enforcement officers arrived at the scene around noon, greeted by an overwhelming stench of decay under the scorching sun. The source of the odor was quickly located when they opened the trunk of the car. Beneath a pile of items and rags, they found the lifeless body of an elderly man, next to whom lay a blood-stained baseball bat. It was later confirmed that the body belonged to Dr. Burchard, who had been missing for 5 days. Judy had reported his disappearance on March 2nd, when she couldn't reach him at their scheduled time, and she immediately feared the worst. She contacted the police, hoping against hope that he would be found alive. Tragically, that was not the case. The autopsy revealed a horrific series of injuries on the elderly man's body. He had sustained multiple abrasions, bruises, and superficial cuts. The examination also showed that he had suffered severe head injuries, likely inflicted by the baseball bat found beside him in the trunk. Part of his ear had been severed, and his hands bore numerous cuts, suggesting a desperate attempt to defend himself. Additionally, there were bruises on his face with a peculiar imprinted pattern. The most shocking discovery, however, was that the man had been placed in the trunk while still alive, where he slowly suffocated under the intense desert sun. As the police investigated the crime scene, they discovered that the car was rented in Kelsey Turner's name, making her the prime suspect. Judy provided the authorities with the address of the house where the blonde lived and where the deceased doctor had gone, as it was also rented in his name. However, when the police arrived, they found the house empty. Inside, they noticed scattered containers of cleaning agents and a strong smell of household chemicals, indicating a hasty attempt to erase any evidence of the crime. The house had been occupied by Turner, her 4-year-old son, her new boyfriend John Logan Kennison, and 2 neighbors, Diana Pina and Jeremy Eric. Since they had all fled, they became suspects, as it seemed unlikely that the petite blonde could have inflicted such severe injuries on the doctor or moved his body to the car trunk alone. The police managed to interview Jeremy, who recalled that he and his girlfriend had left the house while the doctor was still alive and unharmed. According to Jeremy, his girlfriend had drunk too much and flirted with the doctor, trying to get a few $100s, similar to Kelsey's tactics. This had enraged Kelsey, who accused the woman of trying to steal her boyfriend. The 2 women almost got into a fight, and Jeremy had to quickly take his girlfriend away from the house. He hadn't returned for several days and was unaware of the subsequent events. Police discovered that Dr. Burchard habitually carried a notebook containing bank account details and passwords, but frequently misplaced it. Following his murder, the notebook went missing, and substantial sums were withdrawn from 2 of his accounts on March 3rd. The authorities promptly blocked the accounts and cards, and on March 21st, Kelsey and her boyfriend J.N. were apprehended in Stockton, California, after a second attempt to withdraw funds. Prior to their arrest, the couple, accompanied by their child, had been evading detection by hiding in motels, constantly changing their location and paying in cash. They later expressed regret for not completely depleting Burchard's accounts initially, and subsequently planned to empty them and flee to Mexico with the money. However, by the time they made their second attempt, the authorities had already blocked the accounts, leading to their capture. According to Diana, after Jeremy and his girlfriend left, a heated argument broke out between Turner and Dr. Burchard. This was triggered by the doctor's refusal to give Turner another cent. In a fit of rage, Turner threatened to ruin Dr. Burchard's reputation by spreading false rumors about his behavior with his young patients. As the situation escalated and Turner became physically aggressive, Dr. Burchard locked himself in a room for safety. However, J.N. forced open the door and violently attacked the elderly doctor with a bat, causing a severe hematoma and a nosebleed. Diana intervened, begging everyone to calm down. Upon seeing Dr. Burchard's condition, she urged them to take him to the hospital, worried about the consequences of their actions. Before they left, Dr. Burchard promised Diana that he would report to the police that he was attacked and robbed by strangers. The 4 of them then drove to the garage, where Dr. Burchard was seated in the back of the car. Kelsey instructed Diana to return to the house and thoroughly clean up, making sure to remove all traces of blood. Diana started cleaning as told, but heard Dr. Burchard's cries from the garage. Rushing back, she saw Kelsey and Kennison brutally attacking him, trapping him in the car. It was clear they never meant to take him to the hospital, but planned to kill him with a bat and knife. Diana was forced back to cleaning, fearing for her life. Later, she heard the cars drive away, and only Johns returned with Kelsey. From the start, Diana chose to cooperate with the authorities by agreeing to a plea deal, which meant she would reveal everything she knew about the case. In return, she avoided being charged with being an accomplice and received a relatively light 3-year sentence for tampering with evidence. In contrast, her former lovers refused to take responsibility and instead blamed each other for the crime. However, it was easy to prove their guilt because they left behind significant evidence in the car, and phone records showed they were in the desert on the night of March 2nd, where the car with the body was abandoned. Kennison was convicted of second-degree homicide and received a 45-year prison sentence with the possibility of parole after 18 years. The situation with Turner was more complicated. After her arrest, she announced that she was pregnant, which significantly delayed her trial. While in prison, she gave birth to a girl, and both the newborn and her son were placed in the care of social services because none of Turner's relatives were willing to take on the responsibility. In January 2023, following her lawyer's advice, Kelsey Turner admitted her guilt and was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole no earlier than 10 years from the start of her sentence. She is currently serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center in Las Vegas. In conclusion, it is worth noting that ABC's documentary series 20th Century aired an episode in February 2023 titled A Model Murder, which detailed the heinous crime committed by Turner and her boyfriend against Dr. Burchard. The case of Vicki Roberts. Vicki Roberts, born Victoria Smith, was born in September 1984 in Cheshire, England. She grew up in a conservative and religious family with an older sister. The sisters attended a Christian school where they developed their musical talents and sang in the choir. Vicki was known for being kind, friendly, and helpful, always willing to lend a hand. After high school, Vicki enrolled in university and worked part-time at an IKEA store to fund her education. That's where she met Michael Roberts, a charismatic and sociable young man who was only a year older than her. Michael was also a student and an athlete who took care of his appearance. Initially, Vicki found Michael too talkative and intrusive, but he eventually won her over with his charming personality. Michael was born in June 1983 in Warrington, Cheshire, to a prominent chemical engineer and his family. As the eldest of 2 sons, Michael was raised with high expectations and strict discipline. His parents instilled in him the belief that he was destined for greatness, and Michael grew up to be ambitious, driven, and confident. He was a natural socialite, effortlessly making friends and commanding attention with his charismatic personality. His striking appearance, sense of humor, and intellectual curiosity only added to his charm. However, his parents' constant praise and emphasis on his superiority may have contributed to Michael's growing narcissism, which intensified over time. Michael desperately wanted to please his parents, so he strived to be the perfect son and meet their expectations. Meanwhile, Roberts, a womanizer, had a string of girlfriends and mistresses. He was skilled at secretly dating multiple people simultaneously, making each one believe they were the only one. He got a thrill from pursuing girls, particularly those who seemed out of his reach. One such girl was Vicki, who Michael was determined to win over. Initially, she kept him at arm's length, rejecting even his casual invitations to walk together after work or grab coffee. Vicki was a dedicated student and devoted her free time to church activities, leaving no room for dating or romance. It took Michael a few months to convince Vicki to go out with him. He won her over with his charming and sweet nature, showering her with flowers, gifts, and little surprises. He even took her to meet his parents, who adored her and gave their seal of approval for their son's choice. Vicki was convinced of his sincerity and eventually agreed to be his girlfriend. Michael became her first love and for a while, her only one. She was deeply happy with him, and it seemed like destiny had brought them together. Michael, too, seemed to fall in love and was ready to settle down, but their happiness was short-lived. From the outside, Their relationship looked perfect. They were both young, attractive, full of energy, ambitious, and had big plans for the future. However, Vicky soon discovered that Michael had an irrepressible sexual appetite and a passion for experimentation in bed. At first, Michael didn't pressure Vicky too much, fearing she would leave him. But once he was confident she wouldn't go anywhere, he revealed his true desires. The modest and religious Vicky was shocked by what was happening, but she was deeply in love with Michael and trusted him. For a long time, she kept their bedroom secrets hidden behind closed doors. Michael made her an official marriage proposal, which she happily accepted. She genuinely believed that after the wedding, her fiancé would stop his extreme experiments. Meanwhile, one of Vicky's closest friends began to notice that she was hiding bruises and small injuries under her clothes. The friend confronted Vicky, asking if her fiancé was abusing her and if she needed help. At first, Vicky denied everything, but eventually admitted that the marks were a result of her fiancé's extreme intimate experiments. Michael had a strong passion for bondage and using various toys and devices. Vicky confided in her friend that they had intimate encounters up to 5 times a day, but Michael still remained unsatisfied. He saw himself as a skilled lover, and intimacy was an art form and a way for him to express himself. Although Michael occasionally made concessions when Vicky refused to participate in some of his dangerous experiments, he usually managed to convince her to go along with his desires. After defending her diploma, Vic found herself facing an unplanned pregnancy, which prompted her to change jobs. She was soon hired as an account manager at a logistics company. Around the same time, Michael left IKEA and began working as a sales consultant at a large retail chain selling electronics. Michael flourished in his new role, leveraging his charisma, communication, and persuasive skills to consistently exceed sales targets. As a result, he quickly rose through the ranks, earning a promotion to senior sales. The management even considered transferring him to the main office, but first he needed to undergo training and improve his qualifications. As Michael attended training sessions and traveled to London for business, he felt proud and accomplished. However, in the process, he began to neglect his young fiancée, Vic. He only seemed to remember her existence when he needed intimacy, and their relationship suffered as a result. They stopped talking, hardly spent time together, and outside of the bedroom, Vic seemed to be invisible to him. Michael started having numerous affairs with co-workers, clients, and mere acquaintances while simultaneously planning his wedding to Vicky. He had an insatiable appetite for intimacy with various women, which boosted his self-esteem and gave him a sense of accomplishment. When Vicky discovered she was pregnant, she excitedly shared the news with Michael, expecting him to expedite their wedding plans. However, Michael's reaction was one of anger and frustration. He insisted that Vicky terminate the pregnancy, citing their young age and the idea that they had their whole lives ahead of them to have children. Vicky was shocked by his demand, but refused to consider abortion, prompting Michael to try to persuade her through other means. Michael convinced the bride, Vicky, that if her religious parents found out she was pregnant and living with him out of wedlock, they would be furious. He promised that they would keep the abortion a secret and have children after they got married. Vicky was torn, but Michael's persuasive nature eventually won her over, and she had the procedure. However, the abortion came with complications, and Vicky spent several days in the hospital, followed by 3 weeks of recovery. The doctor strictly forbade her from having sex during this time, which sent Michael into a rage. It dawned on Vicky that Michael had mental health issues and a sex addiction. Without intimacy, he became unhinged, often leaving the house, claiming he had urgent work matters to attend to. Vicky suspected that Michael was seeking intimacy outside their relationship, but she genuinely believed that everything would change after they got married, and she could help him overcome his infidelity. However, their 2-year engagement revealed a different reality. Michael had no intention of marrying Vicky, as his current situation suited him perfectly. He had a loyal fiancée at home who took care of his household needs, as well as multiple mistresses on the side, whom he regularly replaced. Vicky always took Michael's promises at face value, even when she discovered his infidelity. She forgave him as long as he assured her it was the last time and that he would change. However, as time passed, Vicky began to pressure Michael for marriage, as she wanted a complete family and children. Her parents also increasingly raised this question, but what ultimately pushed the issue was the insistence of Michael's parents, whom he didn't want to disappoint. Vicky was a kind and sweet person whom everyone loved. Her parents-in-law adored her and considered her an ideal match for their son. They were eager to see the couple get married and have grandchildren. With the help of their parents, the couple organized a grand wedding with all the trimmings, including a white dress and a limousine. The newlyweds looked happy and in love, with a long and fulfilling life ahead of them. After the wedding, the couple settled into a large and cozy house in a prestigious area of Warrington, not far from Robert's parents. However, what the relatives didn't know was that Michael had a dark side that Vicky was already well aware of. Despite being married, Michael did not love Vicky and only saw her as a way to appear normal in the eyes of others. Vicky never complained about Michael's infidelities and strange behaviors, and he was able to continue cheating on her without anyone suspecting a thing. At work, Michael was successful, earning promotions and a good salary after being transferred to a new office. Michael's direct supervisor, Carrie Hall, was a 10-year-old older, divorced mother who worked as the head of administration at Phones for You. Despite her busy schedule, she was attractive, well-groomed, and strong-willed as required by her position. For a long time, she ignored the signs of attention from her young subordinate, Michael. However, Michael saw this as a challenge and made a concerted effort to win her over, using his natural charm and eloquence. After about a month, Carrie reciprocated, and they began a romantic relationship, secretly meeting in hotel rooms. Carrie described their relationship as turbulent, passionate, and experimental. As a mature, self-confident woman, Carrie was flattered by the attention of a younger man and was open to trying new things. With her, Michael could fulfill his fantasies that he couldn't with his modest wife. Michael frequently deceived his wife by claiming he was working late or attending corporate trainings, when in reality, he was meeting his mistress. He confided in his mistress about his unhappiness in his marriage, calling it a youthful mistake and expressing his willingness to divorce his wife. However, he failed to take action as his wife refused to grant him a divorce. The affair with Carrie lasted over a year, but she didn't pressure him for divorce, content with their secret hotel trysts, physical marks, and risky games. Carrie, a sports enthusiast who always took pride in her figure, suddenly changed her style after starting a relationship with Michael. She began wearing long-sleeved, high-necked clothes, which was unusual for her. A concerned friend noticed the change, and Carrie confided in her about Michael's unusual intimate preferences. She revealed that Michael enjoyed experimenting with rough, controlling behaviors, such as biting, squeezing, and tying her up. Carrie showed her friend the physical marks these activities had left on her body. Although her friend urged her to go to the police, Carrie refused, saying that she had consented to these activities and that Michael usually warned her beforehand. However, she admitted that things sometimes got out of control, like when Michael would strangle her to supposedly enhance her pleasure, causing her to lose consciousness. Despite fearing these strangulation games, Carrie continued to succumb to Michael's persuasion, hoping that he would eventually tire of these cruel experiments, or that she would become desensitized to them. Michael's wife and mistresses didn't try to intervene. Before they got married, Vicky had already suspected Michael's infidelity through open letters and a love letter. Despite knowing about his affairs, she believed her love and care could transform him into an exemplary family man. However, after their wedding, the situation deteriorated, and Michael convincingly denied his cheating. Vicky decided to investigate her husband's infidelity by looking through his phone while he was asleep. She was shocked to discover numerous intimate conversations between Michael and Carrie, as well as other girls, including explicit photos. Despite her devastation, Vicky did not want to upset her family, so she kept the discovery to herself and moved in with a friend instead of telling her parents and sister. Before leaving, Vicky wrote a heartfelt letter to Michael, confessing her love for him and acknowledging that he was the central figure in her life. However, she also made it clear that she was aware of his infidelity and would not tolerate it. Vicky informed Michael that she was giving him time to reflect on their relationship, but she would not stay in the marriage if his behavior continued. She wrote the letter by hand and left it on the refrigerator for him to find. Michael didn't feel emotional about the message, nor was he upset by his wife's departure. However, he didn't want to lose the comfort of having a quiet and obedient partner who took care of the household and put up with his quirky behavior and unusual tastes. That same evening, Michael went to Vicky's friend's house, bringing a large bouquet of flowers. He got down on his knees, apologized, and begged Vicky to come back to him, promising to be faithful and making her his one and only. Vicky wanted to believe him and decided to return home, where a new mistress was waiting. Michael didn't stop seeing Carrie, but he became more cautious and even made an effort to come home for dinner, which his wife had carefully prepared. He deleted messages on his phone, changed the password on his social media profiles, and started an affair with a young employee named Karen Wilson, who was engaged to be married. Despite this, Michael pursued Karen relentlessly, making himself out to be a miserable and unhappy lover. He was so drawn to Karen that after 2 months, he decided to end things with 33-year-old Carrie Hall, whom he had grown tired of. Michael told Karen a fabricated story about being unhappy in his marriage and promised to leave his wife soon. Karen eventually gave in, and they became intimate in the office. A week later, she broke off her engagement and waited for Michael to follow through on his promise. Michael didn't plan to divorce Vicky, but he wanted to end their connection and start a new relationship with another woman. To achieve this, he lied to Vicky, telling her that he had already filed for divorce and moved in with his parents. This was a fatal mistake, as Vicky became suspicious that he was still cheating on her. Decided to take action, Vicky waited until Michael was in the shower and took his phone, but she found nothing incriminating because he had deleted all text messages and changed the password on his social media account. Undeterred, Vicky waited until Michael fell asleep and then took his work laptop, where she discovered his account on the social network was still active. On the laptop, she found conversations with his new girlfriend, in which he confessed his love, claimed to be divorcing his wife, and said he was living with his parents. The discovery was a huge shock for Vicky. She took screenshots of the intimate messages as proof of her husband's infidelity and saved them on her laptop. She also found several hotel room receipts in his wallet, which further implicated him. The next morning, Vicky confronted Michael with the evidence, and for the first time in their relationship, she lost her temper. Michael tried to apologize and promised to change, but Vicky threatened to tell his parents everything, hoping they could finally make him see sense. Michael was furious when his wife Vicky threatened to reveal his secrets to his parents. In a fit of rage, he slapped her. Vicky, determined to carry out her threat, got up and headed for the door. Michael caught up with her, grabbed a heavy jewelry box from the dressing table, and hit her twice on the head, knocking her unconscious. Then, he squeezed her throat with his hands until she stopped breathing. With no remorse, Michael wrapped Vicky's lifeless body in a blanket, packed it into several large garbage bags, and carried it to the garage. He then quickly cleaned up the house, removing most of Vicky's belongings. After calling Karen, he invited her over and they had dinner, enjoying themselves in the same house where he had just murdered his wife. The next day, Michael ran off with Karen, leaving behind the scene of his crime. Michael told his parents that his wife had left him for another man. To convince them, he went to their home, cried on his mother's shoulder, and showed her messages on his wife's phone. But what he didn't reveal was that he had sent those messages himself, pretending to be his wife. The messages said that she had lost interest in him, met someone else, and wanted to live with this new person. Meanwhile, Michael also sent messages to his wife's parents from her phone, saying that she had fallen in love with someone else, left with him, and asked them not to contact her and give her space. The Smiths, concerned about their daughter Vicky, immediately tried to contact her, but their calls were consistently rejected. In response, they only received messages asking them to give her time, which seemed strange to them. They then decided to visit Michael's house to get some answers, but his story only raised more questions and doubts. When they discovered that Vicky had stopped showing up for work without warning, they became even more worried and decided to file a police report. On December 1st, 2009, the police launched an investigation. It was discovered that Michael had purchased a shovel, rope, rags, and detergents from a hardware store that day, which seemed suspicious. However, he hadn't disposed of the body by the time the police arrived at his home. Although the police didn't find anything incriminating, Michael's behavior and story raised many questions. What was particularly striking was that they overlooked a large package in the corner of the garage. During the initial inspection of the marital home, no signs of the missing woman's clothes, documents, or personal belongings were found, suggesting that she might have voluntarily left. However, Vicky's laptop was discovered in the bedroom, and upon seizing it, the police found screenshots of Michael's conversations with his mistresses, which Vicky had saved. The police then requested a geolocation of Vicky's cell phone, which regularly received messages from her husband and relatives. The search revealed that the phone had been in the marital home the entire time. In a subsequent search of the Roberts home, law enforcement officials made a disturbing discovery in the garage. But just as they were processing this new evidence, Michael suddenly vanished from under their noses, taking a wallet with cash that allowed him to remain hidden for several days. Michael's money ran out, so he turned to one of his mistresses, Lavina T., asking to stay with her for a while. However, one evening, she heard on the news that Michael was wanted for murdering his wife. Without hesitation, she reported his whereabouts to the police, leading to his arrest. When questioned, Michael broke down in tears, claiming he was innocent. He insisted that his wife's death was an accident, resulting from a consensual intimate game where she asked him to strangle her with a rope belt, but he overdid it. However, forensic experts uncovered contradictory evidence. The autopsy revealed that Michael's wife was strangled with bare hands, attacked from behind, and had 2 extensive hematomas on her head that occurred before her death, ruling out any connection to the alleged intimate game. Michael's trial began in January 2010, where he continued to plead innocence and hoped for leniency. Nevertheless, the autopsy results proved that Michael brutally hit his wife twice on the head and then strangled her, hiding her body in the garage. Michael Roberts was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, but with the possibility of parole after serving 17 years. This means that, if he demonstrates good behavior, he may be eligible for release as early as 2027. The case of Lindsay Burbeck. Sarah and her boyfriend Brandon arrived at her mother Lindsay's home for a scheduled tea party, but no one answered the door. This was unusual, so Sarah tried to contact her mother several times, but there was no response. She sent 2 text messages, "Where are you?" and a series of question marks, but still received no answer. After waiting outside for an hour, Sarah called her father, Tim Burbeck, to report that her mother was missing and not answering her phone. Tim picked up Sarah and Brandon and took them to his house around midnight. Sarah and Tim then returned to Lindsay's house with a spare set of keys, but found no signs of her or any indication of what might have happened. The house was in order, with no note of explanation. At 12:11 a.m. on August 13th, Tim reported Lindsay missing to the police, telling the dispatcher that his ex-wife was missing and could not be found. The disappearance of Lindsay shook the small suburban community to its core. In response, hundreds of people from the community banded together to search for her. The search party consisted of men and women, grandparents, dog walkers, teenagers with bicycles, and mothers with strollers. Despite most of them not knowing Lindsay personally, they were determined to find her. For 2 consecutive days, people gathered at Copus, fueled by hope of finding a crucial clue that could solve the mystery of her disappearance. After days of searching, posting appeals on social media and putting up posters, the community's efforts continued unabated. However, as the days turned into weeks, it became increasingly clear that the search would be a challenging one. With each passing day, the chances of finding Lindsay alive grew slimmer. The detectives classified Lindsay as high risk, given that she had never gone missing before, and her family described her disappearance as uncharacteristic of her. Nevertheless, the search party refused to give up, driven by their determination to find Lindsay. The local community quickly sprang into action, printing and distributing thousands of posters featuring Lindsay's face throughout the neighborhood. A Facebook group dedicated to the search also rapidly gained popularity, reaching 10,000 members within hours of the police appeal being posted online. As a result, posters were soon plastered on every available surface, including lampposts, storefronts, and traffic lights, calling for the public's help in finding Lindsay. The police launched a comprehensive investigation into her disappearance from her home, involving specialist officers, dog handlers, firefighters, mountain rescue teams, volunteers, and the city's search and rescue team. They scoured the area around Copus and the surrounding countryside, using drones and helicopters to search popular walking and running routes. 4 days after Lindsay vanished, the police released CCTV footage showing her last known movements. The footage, captured at 4:10 p.m. on Burnley Road, showed her walking towards Copus, wearing a distinctive purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As the search entered its 7th day, hopes of finding Lindsay alive were dwindling. Despite the extensive efforts, the police had yet to uncover any leads on her whereabouts. However, they stressed that there was no evidence to suggest she had fallen victim to a crime, leaving open the possibility that she might still be found alive. The search for Lindsay Burbeck continued into the evening, with hundreds of local residents joining the first mass public search of Copus after a social media appeal. The breakthrough came when a local resident's dog ran into a wooded area in Arrington Cemetery. The dog's strange behavior, sniffing and digging, caught its owner's attention. As the owner approached, they were met with a horrific sight, something soft and unidentifiable underfoot, accompanied by a terrible smell and swarms of flies. Peering closer, the owner saw a foot protruding from the ground, surrounded by earth and grass, wrapped in clear plastic bags. On August 24th, 12 days after Lindsay's disappearance, her body was discovered in the cemetery, buried in a shallow grave. The gruesome discovery marked the end of the search for Lindsay and the beginning of a murder investigation. Dr. Naomi Carter, a pathologist, performed an autopsy on Lindsay's body and concluded that the cause of death was a broken neck, inflicted with extreme force that crushed the larynx. The injury was likely caused by a foot or knee strike. Additionally, there were signs of an attempt to amputate Lindsay's right leg with a saw after her death, resulting in a deep laceration down to the bone. Despite the poor condition of the body, Dr. Carter found that Lindsay's injuries were catastrophic. However, she could not rule out the possibility of sexual activity on the day of Lindsay's disappearance due to the advanced state of decomposition. Before Lindsay's body was discovered, the police and members of the public had searched the area for several days without finding anything. During the search, community volunteers and a police dog handler reported seeing a blue wheelie garbage can abandoned in nearby bushes, but its significance was not yet understood. On August 20th, at 9 p.m., volunteers searching the cemetery found a dumpster with a dark stain on the outside, which they suspected might be blood. They took photos and called the police. 2 officers arrived, inspected the dumpster, and found a brown mark that they believed was dirt. Despite this, they decided the dumpster looked new, and there was no evidence linking it to Lindsay's disappearance, so they left it in place. Around the same time, other important clues were discovered in the cemetery, but initially overlooked. On August 18th, local resident Christine Alderson found a bloody cloth on the grass while walking her dogs with her daughter. Although she thought the fresh red blood might belong to a homeless man who frequented the area, she still reported it. Another dog walker, Judith Bibby, found red clothing hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cardinal Hill Trail, which was likely Lindsay's jacket. She also heard a child's voice, but no signs of struggle, yelling, or screaming. On August 25th, investigators returned to the crime scene and discovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave. The gloves had traces of blood on them, and upon forensic testing, the results showed that the gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside surfaces, while Lindsay's DNA was found on the outside surface of the left glove. Additionally, a pair of Lindsay's Skechers sneakers, which had been cut along the sole, were found in a blue plastic bag discarded in the cemetery. Further analysis of the evidence revealed that Lindsay's body had been wrapped in plastic sheeting, and beneath the sheeting, foliage and grass not native to the cemetery grounds were found. This led investigators to conclude that Lindsay's body had been moved from a different location before being buried in the cemetery. During the investigation, detectives remembered a blue trash can that had caught volunteers' attention. Reviewing CCTV footage, they made a surprising discovery: a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area multiple times. The same camera caught him visiting the cemetery 4 times. A suspect emerged, and footage of him carrying a trash can sparked a stir when broadcast on the news. The public helped identify the 16-year-old who surrendered to police the same day. Rocky Marciano Price, a local resident, was the boy in the videotape. He lived with his parents and 5 siblings in their family home of 3 decades on Winnie Hill Road in Arrington. Rocky had several mental health conditions, including autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity, which he had struggled with since childhood. His low IQ added to his learning and communication challenges. Rocky attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick a few days a week, where teachers described him as quiet and nonverbal. A 2015 psychologist's report found that Rocky had a limited understanding of his emotions and emotional well-being. He struggled to connect events and emotions. A 2016 report stated that Rocky was unresponsive to strangers and required constant supervision and care. His teachers, including Timothy Bradley, who taught at the school for 18 months, tried to engage Rocky in his education, but he preferred hands-on activities to academic subjects. Rocky rarely participated in conversations, even when discussing topics that interested him. Despite this, he was physically strong and tough for his age. He enjoyed activities like going to the gym, tending to the family's chickens, watching movies, and playing Xbox. Rocky seemed to exist in his own world, often unaware of his actions. Rocky Price randomly targeted Lindsay, killing her simply because she was lonely in the wrong place at the wrong time. On the first anniversary of the crime, August 12, 2020, Price went on trial and was unanimously found guilty by a jury after an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation. Although Price admitted to helping dispose of Lindsay's body, he claimed he had no role in her murder. He stated that a stranger approached him and asked for his help in burying the body in exchange for payment. However, evidence found at his home in Arrington contradicted his claim, including plastic bags identical to those found at Lindsay's grave. Additionally, a tracksuit and other clothing found at his home matched the outfit he wore on surveillance cameras on August 12th, 16th, and 17th. further implicating him in the crime. Defense attorney Mark Fenn Halls argued that Rocky Price, although responsible for burying the victim's body in the cemetery, was not her killer. Despite substantial evidence, Price pleaded not guilty to the crime, but admitted to moving the body. During the trial, Price, through his attorney, provided a statement explaining his movements between the crime scene in Copus and the cemetery where the body was found. However, the prosecutor maintained that Price acted alone. The motive behind the random attack on 47-year-old mother of two, Lindsay, was never revealed, as the perpetrator did not know the victim. The judge sentenced Price to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years. He will be eligible for release when the parole board deems him no longer a danger to society. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, stating that Price clearly intended to kill a woman who was walking alone just minutes before Lindsay's incident. Meanwhile, another woman, Zoe Braithwaite, had a narrow escape from a similar attack. She encountered a suspicious teenager wearing a hood and walking alone on a parallel path. Her instincts kicked in, and she became wary of the individual, noticing that he looked out of place for a walk in the woods at that time of year. She quickened her pace and eventually ran away, likely saving her own life. The judge noted that if it hadn't been Zoe, it could have been someone else, and it was unfortunately Lindsay who fell victim. This was a calculated and intentional attack. After attempting to target one woman, he deliberately pursued another lone woman. His actions after the crime reveal his ability to think and plan. His teachers testified that he excelled in practical tasks, which he utilized to conceal the body. Rocky Price made 2 trips to Copus on the evening of August 12th. At 6:55 p.m., he was caught on CCTV cameras carrying a black backpack, possibly containing a saw to dismember Lindsay's body. Later, at 8:28 p.m., dog walker Anthony Doe witnessed him pulling out an empty trash can from the same location where his grandfather and other family members are buried. Without showing any signs of panic or excitement, Rocky Price executed a premeditated plan to dispose of Lindsay's body. He placed her in a blue trash can, dragged her to the cemetery, and spent over an hour burying her near the railroad line. He left behind a saw, gloves, and a trash can at the scene. The senseless and brutal murder of a stranger in broad daylight is deeply disturbing to society. The random nature of the attack and his prior stalking of another woman demonstrate that he poses a significant threat to the public. Rocky Marciano Price's name and photo were published for the first time after a judge lifted restrictions following his guilty verdict. Previously, his identity was kept secret due to his young age. Although the jury knew details about Price, they were not fully disclosed until after the verdict. Price's mental illness does not excuse his actions, as he knew killing was wrong. Lindsay's funeral was held at St. Margaret's Church in Heighten on September 20th, where over 200 mourners gathered to pay their respects. As police directed traffic on Manchester Road, Lindsay's coffin, adorned with flowers, was carried into the church. The outpouring of sympathy was evident in the dozens of bouquets from friends, family, and strangers alike left at the scene in her memory. According to her daughter Sarah, Lindsay was a woman full of optimism and positivity, always looking forward to the future. In fact, she had plans to visit Glasgow with her friend Sharon and was hoping to find love on the Match.com dating site. Tragically, her bright future was cut short on a sunny summer day. Rocky Price's fascination with death and mutilation may be a symptom of a deeper issue, such as autism. This neurodevelopmental disorder can cause difficulties with social interaction, motor skills, and repetitive behaviors, leading to withdrawal and isolation. While the exact cause is unclear, the consequences of Rocky's actions fit the severity of his crime, including burying Lindsay's mutilated body.